Today, I have this Mantua GP20 and this Mantua F7 to tinker on and revive. First on the docket for testing is the Santa Fe F7. I'll give this thing some power. And as you can see, this one does indeed run. This is full power. It's a little bit sluggish, but this thing essentially just needs some fresh oil and a little bit of a cleanup. And next up is the Burlington GP20, which, as you can see, this one also runs. This one runs a little bit worse than the F7, but they both do run and just kind of need some basic maintenance. Typically, when I'm working on my models and reviving them, I would do one locomotive at a time. But in the instance of these two models, I couldn't decide which to work on. So quite some time ago, I made a community post with a poll, which I'll post in right here really quick, and the overwhelming majority of you wanted me to work on both of these. I couldn't decide, so I gave the options of restoring neither of them on camera, both of them, or either of them. And I believe that like 70% of people or 80% of people or something like that said they wanted me to restore both of them, so that's what we're going to be doing today. First, I'm going to take the GP20 off to the side, and we're going to focus on the F7. Before we start, this is one of the Mantuas with a really stupid design that I hate regarding how they mount the trucks into the body of the locomotive. The front truck is fine and normal, a little bit, but the rear truck is where the problem resides. If you can see, there's a screw down there. Most of these are held in by clips on the side. This one has screws, which are kind of impossible to get out. So I was planning on doing this anyway, but I have to break off the side frames to get this truck out of the locomotive, which is kind of annoying. So we'll put this thing in the engine cradle, we'll do that, we'll take the truck out, and we'll get to work. So now it's time for the little trick I was taught with working on these Mantua locomotives with the riveted in bases. What I've been told you can do is you can actually pry off the plastic wheel, and that'll give you access to the gearbox, the commutator, all that fun stuff, and it'll just give you a little more room to work. And just like that, those wheels are off the model. Next up, I'm going to try and remove the brush on this side just so I can get access to the commutator on the same side that I have the wheels off. And now this locomotive is as far apart as I need it to be. I'm going to start by trying to clean off the commutator with a fiberglass pencil. And now that that's mostly cleaned out, I'm going to grab a toothpick and I'm going to clean out the little gaps. Alright, and the commutator is all good to go. Now, one of the downsides about these Mantua models is that you really can't get in and clean out the gearbox really well, which I don't really like. I'm just going to pour a little bit of rubbing alcohol into each side. This isn't going to be exact or anything, just to try and loosen up some of the dirt and stuff in there. Then I want to see if I can turn this over just a little bit by hand, see if I can loosen up some of that dirt and stuff, and then try and see if I can stick a Q-tip in there and get any of that dirt out. It's not a ton, but I definitely got a little bit of that dirt out. So now I'm going to let this dry just a little bit. Then I'll come back, give this thing some fresh oil, and probably in the meantime, I'll clean off this truck casing, whatever you want to call it. Then we can put the whole thing back together. I just did the other one off camera, but I'll clean off this brush really quickly. Then I'll go back to letting all this dry. So everything here is dried up, and now it's time to just put a little bit of fresh oil in this model's system. I'm going to start with some grease, then I'll use some oil, then we can put the wheels back on. And now that those wheels are back on, I'm just going to check the gauge and make sure that they are correct. Then we'll come back and finish putting this thing back together. Alright, I am back once again, and this time I need to just clean up the wheels on this thing. And then after that, I believe I should be good to go. I'll give this front truck a little bit of fresh oil, and then I think that's it. I'll just have to screw this in and glue the side frames back on. Alright, and just about everything should be back together on this model. Before I go and glue those side frames back on, I want to test this thing out just to make sure it works, because I don't want to have to break those back off again. That would be annoying. Alright, it is now time to fire this thing up and see if it'll run. So I'll give this thing quite a bit of power. And it starts. That's a good sign. It seems a little jittery, so it might just need some time to break in. But I think this is a good sign, so I'm going to glue the truck covers back on, and we'll start on the GP20. Now it's on to engine 2, well, I guess more accurately, 5628, but you get the point. This engine I'm taking a little bit of a different approach on. As you can see, it's pretty filthy, so I want to get all the internals out of this thing, wash off the shell, and while the shell's drying, we can work on cleaning everything up in here. So I'll get the engine cradle out, and we will get to work tearing this thing apart. Alright, and just like that, everything is apart. Before I go clean off this shell, let me show you some of the damage and stuff that's occurred to this thing. This was a free model that was going to be thrown out, so obviously it's not perfect, but there's a considerable amount of damage to it. On the back end here, this piece is kind of bent in. I believe there's a piece missing right here, and up front is where it's really bad. A whole bunch of this front pilot is missing, which is no good, but in the end, this was a free model, so I can't really complain that much. The paint's again chipping off, but for a free model, it's going to be perfectly fine. Now that the shell's decided to escape, I'm going to go wash it off, and we'll return to work on the components that have stayed on the desk. Alright, the shell has been given a bath and is now drying, so this time we're going to do the same thing we did with the other model. This time it's just kind of reversed. I'm going to work on the rear truck first, which in this case is the dummy truck. So I'm just going to clean this off because, as you can see, it's pretty filthy. I don't know how well that comes across on camera, but there's a ton of dirt and stuff on there that just needs to go away. I'll clean up the wheels, give this thing some fresh oil, then we'll move on to the front. So the unpowered rear truck has been completed. Now it's time to start on this front truck, and again, we have to break off the side frames. That is a ton of dirt in there. I am glad I actually took this thing out of the shell. Alright, so there we go. Now we've got access to this thing. So I guess order of business number one is to clean out all the gunk that's in this drive system, well, as much of it as I can around the motor truck as well, because this looks bad. So now that the surround is clean, it's time to start cleaning out this gearbox, then after that, these brass wheels. I'm going to clean off the plastic ones off camera because I'm going to put some traction tires on those, and that's really an annoying thing to watch me do. So I'm just going to do that off screen so you don't have to watch me struggle with those for several minutes. But I'm going to do this the same way I did it with the other unit. I'm just going to pour some rubbing alcohol in the drive system here. And I'm going to just go in and attack this thing with a Q-tip and see what dirt I can get out, because that seemed to work pretty well last time. Alright, I don't think I can do much more than that, but I did get a pretty decent amount of dirt out of there, so that should be good enough. Now I'm going to remove the brush, and then we'll clean off the commutator before cleaning off the wheels. Now that that's done, I can move on to these brass wheels, which have been kind of sitting in this little pool of rubbing alcohol, so that should make them a little bit easier to clean off, and I'll still go over them with a fiberglass pencil again. Now it's time for a little bit of oil and grease. I'm going to put in a lot less than I did on the last model, because that was a little bit excessive. And there we go. Now I'm going to clean off the plastic wheels and put on some traction tires off camera. Then I'll push these back on here, make sure the gauge is right, and we'll come back once the wheels are back on this thing. So I've got all the pieces here, and it's just about time to put them back together, but I do have two little things a note to go over. The first of which is the shell. It's still a little bit damp, but something I wanted to comment on is that Tyco Mantua, whoever made it, I don't really care that much, did a really good job at making a model where if you beat it up, it'll kind of look like it's been weathered, because it's got some paint showing through from underneath here on the cab and all over the model along the sides here. Again, this is a cheap thing, but I thought that was kind of funny. It looks sort of like what would happen if you just let a real thing sit outside for 20 years and beat it up. Again, it would probably have more weathering than this in real life, but I think it's just kind of funny. And second of which, I actually could not put traction tires on this model. So as you see, it's got a little thin slot here, which usually works perfectly fine. However, this has been an issue I've noticed on a lot of models. My traction tires are too thick. I use these dental band things, and as you can see, they're way thicker. They're a lot harder to stretch. They just are a pain to put on. So I need to search for something better that's probably thinner and actually a little bit smaller of a diameter so they go on a little easier. Plus, I've got an old Bachmann plaster thing that needs to get some traction tires, and those are a lot smaller than what I have here. So if anyone has any good suggestions that are not bullfrog snot, please let me know. I've heard of bullfrog snot, and I do not want to end up using it. So, with that little bit out of the way, it's time to reassemble this thing. And involved here is a step that I am not a huge fan of. I have to get a little screw in here, and that's going to be a lot of trial and error. So you'll get to watch me struggle with that once we get this rear truck in. Alright, I decided to cut that out. That took way longer than it needed to, but now that is in place, and we can put the rest of this locomotive back together. Alright, and excluding the truck covers, which I'll put on later, this thing is all back together, so it's time to give it a test run, and if that goes well, we'll glue these back on. So, I've got the GP20 all set up on the track after all that work, so I'll give this thing some power before we put the truck covers back on. And it runs great, that's barely any power. It's definitely noisier in reverse, but I'd call that a pretty good success. So now I'm going to glue those truck covers back on, then we'll test the F7, now that its truck covers have dried back on, and then we'll test this thing out one more time. So, here's the final test run for the F7. I'll give it some power. This one's a little bit more stuttery, it might just need some time to break in. But at higher speeds, this thing runs really well. And I'll let it do one more lap around. So this thing's not perfect, but with the amount of stuff I can actually get to on this thing, I think that's a pretty good result. And now that the truck covers have been attached, it's time for a test run. I'll give it some power. And it runs great. Again, it's a little bit worse in reverse. I'll let the thing do a full lap. But I think that's a success. Even though I couldn't be as thorough as I really wanted to be due to the design of these Mantua units, I still think these turned out pretty well. The headlights on neither of these things work. I'm not too shocked about that, nor do I really care that much, because I don't really plan on keeping these things long term, but I think they run pretty well for what I was able to do to them. And once again, if anyone has any better suggestions for traction tires, please do let me know.